Lexi Martin is 80 years old, and she has had a long career in tech.
I started in 1967 as a programmer. I was one of the first women hired at the Bank of America. I worked my way up to applications manager.
And from there, Lexi went on to work for the Stanford Research Institute and then the Institute for the Future. She retired at 70, but she hated it. So she went back to work as a researcher for almost another decade.
And then I finally retired, although I call it redirecting, about a year and a half ago. But I continued to do research because, that's what I do. That's what gives me joy.
Lexi is part of a growing cohort of older women who are staying in the workforce or going back to it. And this big shift is something we've been reporting on at The Post. Here's business reporter Hannah Ziegler.
1 in every 10 workers in the U.S. today is a woman older than age 55. And I wanted to report this story because these women are staying at work, both because they enjoy their jobs and are really passionate about what they do, but also because there are some greater economic reasons that are forcing women to stay longer. And that dynamic was really interesting to look at.
From the newsroom of The Washington Post, this is Post Reports. I'm Martine Powers. It's Thursday, January 23rd. Today, we talk about the historic number of older women who are still working, and we hear from some of them about why this trend matters. All right, so Hannah, let's unpack this trend a little bit more. And I want to start with the good news here, the good side of all of this, the empowering story that you see in these numbers. Tell me a little bit more about what are the positives of the fact that more older women are staying in the workforce.
Yeah, there are a lot of positives to draw from this trend. So this is the first generation of women who was able to build a career and work for most of their prime working years, which is age 25 to 54. So these women in kind of the baby boomer generation, the older Gen X, they were able to find careers and not just kind of hop from job to job or rely on their partners or rely on other family members. So the fact that more women have been able to build careers has also led to more women in leadership roles and higher educational attainment for women. And that's led them to be able to have a lot more longevity in the workforce. So that's a really great trend that economists point to as something that helps women build wealth and obviously have a lot more career satisfaction and all the good things that make up, worker satisfaction in the economy.
And can you tell me a little bit more about what you heard from some of these women you talked to in terms of their positive feelings about their work or the sense of pride and enjoyment that they have gotten out of their careers and kind of want to continue feeling?
Yeah, it was really beautiful getting to talk to so many women who were so passionate about the careers that they have chosen. And a couple of the women that I talked to had even had either career pivots or they went back to school to do a completely different line of work. But kind of the prevailing message that they had is that with how much flexibility there is in work today and with how many opportunities for advancement they have, both from education and just being able to climb the career ladder, they just feel so much more fulfilled than they expected themselves to when they were younger. And they really have enjoyed being able to foster a work life that is, able to sustain them intellectually and keep them curious and keep them learning.
I was in a day job. I was an office manager, which I was good at, but it wasn't fulfilling my soul. So I really took the leap, quite the leap, and decided to start my own business.
I spoke to one woman named Beth Barani, and she's an author and writing coach. And she was really interesting to me because she articulated how she felt like she finally became fluid in her profession around age 55, 56. She's 56 right now.
I don't imagine myself retiring. I imagine myself maybe teaching less and less and creating more and more as long as I can. I mean, I come from a creative family. People just create until they die.
And Hannah, what strikes me about what you said earlier in terms of some of the factors that are leading to this, one of those is flexibility. And I imagine that the world of remote work from home, or at least having a little bit more flexibility about going into an office or working remotely for a company, I imagine that might play a role also for older women who are in a different stage of their life and might need some of that flexibility, but do want to continue working.
Yeah, remote work has been a huge deal. Experts told me that this was happening generally before the pandemic, but the pandemic really accelerated all of the different reasons why women might want to work longer. So, for example, I talked to one woman who really wants to work and really is passionate about her career, but she couldn't stand going into an office anymore. She couldn't stand being nearly 60 years old and having to take a 30-minute lunch break and having to ask permission to pick up her kids or anything like that. So she works fully remote now, and she has no plans to retire because as long as she can, open up her computer, she can continue to do her job.
And to what extent do you see some of this being a product of the fact that there are more women leaders in the workplace now?
Yeah, a lot of the women that I talked to highlighted that as just a big shift since they entered the workforce to now them being more senior in their careers. And a lot of that can also be chalked up to women today have much higher educational attainment than ever before. So if women are earning more advanced degrees, that gives them a lot more opportunity to advance and to be in those executive positions. And that, in turn, if younger women see a lot of older women advancing in their careers, that just kind of opens the floodgate to a lot of women to, follow in that trend. And Lexi Martin talked to me a little bit about this because when she started as a computer programmer, she didn't really have anyone to look up to in that world.
Well, for the first 20 years of my career, I was the only woman doing what I was doing, basically. And so I didn't have any role models. But, today I think it's just so much better. Younger women that have gotten to C-level, and unfortunately there aren't that many of them, but still, they're just creating a better workplace, I think.
It was a very male-dominated workforce. A lot of it still is, but that profession and a lot of others have become much more balanced between men and women, occupying both, entry-level positions and senior leadership positions. And she was part of the first wave of women to really make that possible for others.
I also feel like this makes sense from a financial sense, thinking about what we know of how women often take longer in their careers to make the same amount as men do, or often take a hit to the amount of money that they're making when they're, having children or having to take time off, or maybe not advancing in those years when they are, when they have young kids, that then maximizing on the other end the amount of time that you're benefiting from finally having gotten to those higher income brackets.
Yeah, the financial side of this is really big because, like you mentioned, women generally take a lot longer to reach the same earnings potential as men throughout their careers, both because they're taking a step aside to take care of children or other family members, and also just because of the gender wage gap that still exists. Women also, in terms of retirement, have, generally less saved than men. Their 401k account balances are traditionally lower. Their Social Security monthly payments are traditionally lower. So those kinds of end-of-life factors for making sure that people are comfortable when they do stop working. It takes a lot of time for women to make up the ground that they lose to wage gaps and, maybe taking a break to take care of others.
After the break, we talk about some of the financial stresses that are leading many women to work longer. We'll be right back.
I'm Jessica Contreras, and I'm a reporter at The Washington Post. Every day at The Post, we are trying to make sure that we are holding powerful institutions accountable. For the last 2 years, for me, that has meant looking at child sexual abuse by members of law enforcement all across the country. We identified at least 1,800 police officers who have been arrested for crimes involving child sexual abuse from 2005 through 2022. That number, figuring out that this is happening and figuring out how it's happening, it never would have been possible without the time and resources it takes to do an investigation like this. this. And when you subscribe to the Washington Post, that's the kind of work that you're supporting, making sure that powerful institutions are held accountable by the taxpayers who pay for their work. Subscriptions support this work and the people behind it. I'm Jessica Contrera, and I'm one of the people behind the Post.
So, Hannah, I want to be honest with you and say that when I talk with older women in my life about their retirement decision, and I'm thinking about like aunts or family friends, a lot of them, and probably most of them, are not saying, oh, I just want to keep working longer because it brings me so much joy to continue going to work in my late 60s or early 70s. And I think what I hear much more often is, well, my financial reality is that I just can't quite retire yet because I'm just not in a financial position, and that these extra years, like, I need to be able to make sure that I have the money that I can actually, be comfortable and be secure in my retirement. So what did your reporting show about that side of things, about what are some of the factors contributing to this trend of older women workers that are more about like the stark financial realities?
So a lot of women do feel the need to work longer, even if they do enjoy their jobs or, want to keep working. There are probably just as many, if not even more, who really feel the pressure and feel the financial pressure to continue in their roles. And that comes down to a few factors. Like I mentioned, women generally save less and women have less balances in their 401k and kind of traditional retirement plans. And then it's also kind of some broader economic factors. More employers now offer 401k plans than defined benefit pension plans. And 401k plans really incentivize you to work as long as you can rather than retire right when you're eligible. So that's kind of a broader shift as well. And with women often taking big gaps or doing career shifts or doing any, non-traditional routes to find their perfect job, especially as they're raising families or kids or anything like that, there is just a lot more pressure for folks to be able to find a good job and find something that will be able to pay their bills late in life. And there are plenty of women who just feel like it's not a reality in the current socioeconomic climate to be able to retire and, have 30 years of retirement or anything like that.
Yeah, tell me about some of the women that you spoke with who described their experiences making that decision. Again, not out of a sense of desire to work longer, but a sense of need or feeling like this was the most financially prudent option.
Some acknowledge that if their employment was a little bit more stable during their prime working years, so if they didn't have those gaps in employment to take care of kids, if they didn't have to step away from their jobs to take care of family members, they may have, renegotiated what their retirement would look like. On the other side of things, people who've worked really hard to stay in the workforce, even if they do want to continue working in a way, they obviously see the benefits that can come from retirement. And retirement is definitely something that has always been on their mind, even long before they decided that they wanted to work into their 60s and 70s.
Hannah, I wonder if you think this is part of a larger trend, thinking about the fact that Americans are living longer and having, longer periods of time after they turn 65. And of course, this isn't necessarily specific to women either, but the idea of people not being able to save enough for retirement when they are living longer and then having to work longer because of that. And this idea that 65 is no longer the automatic age when everyone can just stop working.
This is speaking to broader economic circumstances that a lot of older Americans face today. Most of the folks that I talked to said that if they did retire, Social Security would not provide them nearly enough to be able to live out the rest of their lives comfortably. There is, a general sense among a lot of folks that, what the system has to support retirees just isn't enough. And just a lot of uncertainty around how much you need to save to live, a very comfortable life. And, most folks just choosing the alternative of, I will continue working because I know that I can support myself with the amount that I've made in the past.
What's the effect of having more older women in the workforce?
A lot of the women that I spoke to talked about how older women can both serve as role models for folks who are coming up in the workforce. If there are more women in leadership roles, there can be a lot more empathy for family situations or just better work-life balance that a lot of folks talk to me about.
I think it's fabulous. I As a researcher, I had done research on the value of women on executive C-suites as well as on boards. And, what we get from women is more empathy, more attention to, work-life balance, just better collaboration on teams. And to the extent that we can have that at all levels of organizations. And that's what I think is really critical, that people should be able to work and contribute as long as, they're able to and want to.
A lot of the women really emphasized how much value they can bring. And they may have, taken a break or anything. That doesn't necessarily mean that they should be heard and shouldn't have enough power and enough belief within themselves to continue to grow their careers even at later ages. Beth Brownie articulated this really well when she talked about how many people she knows have really found their voice in whatever career path that they've chosen.
I have friends who are like 60, who are showing no signs of slowing down, who are in fact starting new things. And I feel like we have so much to offer. And also we're in that menopausal, postmenopausal stage where we're like, we have no more F's to give, and this is what I have to say, and this is what I'm going to do.
Hannah, thank you so much for sharing this story.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hannah Ziegler is a business reporter for The Post. The story is part of The Post's Big Shift series, delving into the data on what it means that the workforce is getting older and more female. We'll share links to a couple of these stories in our show notes. That's it for Post Reports. Thanks for listening. Before we go, I want to remind folks about an upcoming event that I'll be doing here in D.C. It's a live podcast taping at the Apple Carnegie Library, focused on the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I'll be talking with Ryan Williams from the D.C. Public Library, both about Dr. King himself, but also about the role of libraries in this moment when what you read can be seen as a political act. I'm really looking forward to this conversation, and I hope you can join us. It's going to be taking place at 2 p.m. on Saturday, January 25th. So if you're here in D.C. and you want to be there, you should sign up in advance. We'll put a link in today's show notes and at postreports.com. Today's episode was produced by Ariel Plotnick and edited by Maggie Penman. It was mixed by Sam Baer. Thank you to Bronwyn Latimer. I'm Martine Powers. We'll be back tomorrow with more stories from the Washington Post.